Dobler for the invocation, to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to have with us tonight Pastor Carl Frazier. Pastor Frazier is the pastor of the New Hope and Love Community Church in Topeka. Pastor Frazier is present in many areas of the community. He's a board member of the Center of Peace and Justice and the Kansas Inter-Religion Roundtable. He's married to Lanessa Frazier, and they have 3 lovely children, 2 wonderful grandchildren. Pastor, we appreciate you being here tonight.
Let us pray together. Gracious Lord, thank you, my Heavenly Father, for the opportunity for us to be here today. And Lord, we are in some strange times right now with a lot of things going on in our community and the world with COVID-19 and jobs and homes and sickness and health care. And a lot of people don't have a friend, Lord, but we know that we have a friend in you, Lord. And Lord, in John 15:13, it said, greater love have no man that this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And Lord, we need more friends today, Lord, to fight racism, fight injustice. We need more friends, Lord, to love one another. Need more friends, Lord, to help one another in a time of need, Lord. And Lord, we just hope today, Lord, that we leave this place, know that we have a friend, Lord. And if we don't have no friend, we have no greater friend we have in you. And Lord, bless everyone here. Bless our leadership. Lord, just bless this city, bless the community, bless the ones in the hospital and nursing home that is suffering from sickness. And Lord, we just thank you for all the things that you have done in the mighty name of Jesus. These and other blessings, rest place your kingdom. Praise your name forever. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I said we now move on to the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acla.
Here.
Ortiz. Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Nager. Here. Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
We have 9 present.
We have 9 present. We now move on to the consent.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the Rock and Food Truck Festival. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting Greater Topeka Partnership an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. C are minutes of the regular meeting of May 19, 2020. And there is a list of cereal malt beverage and open after midnight license emailed to you this afternoon, and staff is recommending approval.
We have heard the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of the body?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval by Mike 1 and a second by Mike 2. Mike 1 being Mike Lesser, Mike 2 being Mike Padilla. Do we have comments or questions with regards to the consent agenda? Seeing none at this point.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Council members Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Acla? Is that a yes? Valdivia Acla?
You're muted, I think.
Yeah.
You're muted. Councilwoman, I think you're muted still.
Okay.
Councilmember Emerson?
Yes.
Padilla?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes.
Nine having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to the action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout temporarily suspending certain governing body rules and procedures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The proposed resolution would extend the suspension of the rules until July 8th. Right now, I think that works well for another decision point for us. Right now, as we look ahead with the agenda, we're looking at July 14th as being the council meeting where we will present the housing study. We really would like to do that one in person. Based on the discussion that we've had in the past related to that issue, having us all back in the same chambers is our desired location for that. So right now, we would then be able to make a decision again on July 7th if we wanted to continue with the suspension of the rules. So this just takes us to that date.
It seems like we're having a few technical issues. I'm getting reports that there is a weird echo, not only coming from me, but I'm also getting messages from our constituents letting us know that they cannot hear from home. So just alerting our teams that they know. So at this point in time, yes, we have the motion. I know. So, Councilwoman Miller, you had a question or a comment?
I did. I just wanted to check as we move forward. For instance, we have a special call meeting the end of July. Various issues are moving. If we chose to have a live meeting before that, we could. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe we could.
Okay, so this gives us the option to continue in this way, but not an obligation to continue in this way?
Correct.
Thank you.
I mean, we could all choose to show up for the meeting and that would solve it.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Additional comments or questions?
Mayor? Mayor?
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor.
Sylvia.
I know you couldn't see me. I just had a question, I guess, City Manager. I got an email tonight, I think most of us did, about when we can start getting public comment again at the meetings. And I do think that's something we've been missing.
Right. My thought is that as soon as the county were to move our ability to have 30 persons in the room, a group gathering of 30, that we could look at doing that. So I think that, for me, is the cut point that way, because we have 10 or 12 of us here and another 4 or 5 staff, and so then that would allow those that specifically wanted to make public comment that we would be looking at that.
Oh, thank you.
Question, sorry. So just to follow up on that, it looks like the county's having a meeting on Thursday, which they may determine their next step. So in theory, we could be looking at as early as next week, correct?
Potentially.
Okay, I just wanted to,
Yep.
but we
Yeah,
have to
I
wait
feel
and
that,
see. But
I feel that will provide us enough cushion with our numbers, those that show versus not show, as far as council members and allowing in the audience. And we would make it that if they truly wanted to make public comment, not just to come to visit the meeting and hang out, that they intended to make public comment.
Somebody please, thank you. Yes, Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. So there would be a procedure to sign up. So if you signed up by 5 o'clock or whatever, then you would be allowed to enter the meeting.
Correct, and that's what we've always done in the past. We have allowed people to show up and sign up at 6 o'clock. What I would say is that we would look at our numbers that had signed up. If there hadn't been anyone, or were still availability for numbers to allow people to go ahead and come to do their public comment, then we would allow it.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Additional comments or questions for our city manager? Okay, Councilwoman Hiller.
Since we're talking about that overall, Zoom is new to me, but what I've realized is that periodically we have a question for staff, and you know who's here and who's not. but we don't. And maybe for those of us who are present, just a list of who's on the call.
Oh, who's online?
The meeting might be helpful.
Basically, it should be any director that isn't present in the room is online following the meeting. That's a general statement. Now, there are exceptions where they request to miss a meeting based on what's on the agenda, but generally, it should be that any director that isn't present is watching on Zoom.
Just to mix it up a little bit, we did the Social Services Committee meeting, Social Service Grant Committee meeting last week, and we have pretty regular attendance from the agencies there. So we just invited them to Zoom in too. But again, they couldn't all be seen on the screen at the same time, so we needed to do some introductions and just know who was there. But it worked fine, actually. So we'll just throw that out there as an option. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no additional comments or questions, we have before us a proposal from staff.
Point of order.
Okay,
Point of order.
Councilman Duncan, yes.
I believe, as of at least 1 minute ago, people can't hear you who are watching. I don't know if we
Yes,
need to take,
and I rebooted, and apparently I was told that it's better.
okay.
Can somebody let me know if I'm able to be heard now?
We can hear you better.
Yeah.
We can, but people watch.
Well,
Can you say like one more thing so I can see if it's coming through that? Yeah, see?
The hills are alive to the sound of music. Okay, so, at this point in time, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Dobler. We have a second by the deputy mayor. At this time, if there's no additional comment, seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmembers Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item B in the agenda, if the clerk would read.
B is an amendment to previously approved resolution number 9174, adopting the 2021-2030 capital improvement program and the 2021 to 2023 capital improvement budget and approving project budgets.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. During the May 19th, 2020 governing body meeting, Councilmember Dobler submitted amendments to the resolution approving the capital improvement budget. Part of that amendment included removal of particular pages, more specifically those that contain programs, projects funded through general obligation bonds and are using revenue generated by the city-wide half-cent sales tax. We consulted with City's Bond Counsel, who advised against the removal of the pages due to the need to ensure, one, the overarching budget authority is intact, and two, the authority to issue bonds is preserved. So therefore, with consultation with Councilman Dobler, we have a proposed amendment tonight. At this point, I'll have Councilman Dobler make comments.
Thank you, City Manager. You pretty well covered it. I think the concern was the page numbers that had been removed in my original proposal contained geo-bonded projects, and there was a concern that would affect the ability to bond those projects. Number one, I appreciate the consultation with the city attorney and finance director. We worked through this, and I'm comfortable that this achieves what I believe we all understood the other night, in that the areas of facilities, sidewalks, and the public works fleet replacement will all come back to the council as a list of projects for approval. The half-cent, anything with a half-cent sales tax will come back in front of the council for approval, either in the form of a list or as a project budget. The page numbers that were removed for the projects that are for the projects that have geo bonding in addition to half-cent sales tax. So it really just cleans up the action that we took the other night. And with that, I would move approval.
We have a motion for approval by Councilman Dobler. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala. Additional comments or questions? Just so that you all know, I'm still being told that I am not audible to the public, so our staff is working on this. No comments or questions, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item C in the agenda, if the clerk would read.
C is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing an extension of premises into public sidewalks for certain business licensed by the state to serve alcohol.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we have a resolution that was put together with an effort by staff in conjunction with consultations with downtown businesses. There is a concern related to COVID that there is a need to relax the ability for restaurants to be able to have additional patrons. The idea has been to move some of those patrons to the outside, and with that, being able to grant temporary opportunities for them to set up outside spaces for dining. So we propose this ordinance in order to help accomplish that. There are a couple of things. There is still some requirements to designate the area where it will be served. You have to continue to have a pedestrian passage area for individuals to be able to pass through on the sidewalk. And they still need to contact the state's Alcoholic Beverage Commission in order to get approval for their areas. But really, this is about trying to allow the opportunity for businesses to expand their seating. When we did put it together, and it was identified that we did not do a complete broadcast throughout the community for those that might have a need or desire to do this, we've identified a number of them within the actual ordinance, and then also Councilman Duncan has a few that he's going to make a request for an amendment on, and we support that. There is a need, and we may have others that we're not identifying tonight that may come forward after they're aware of this change to allow us. So those are my opening comments.
I know that Councilman Duncan does have a proposal. Councilman Duncan, would you like to speak now?
Yeah, thank you. Just a few things. I appreciate staff's work on this. I mean, I think it is important for our businesses to be able to expand. It has a deadline on it. I'll reiterate what the city manager said to all the businesses out there listening. We can only give you so much authority. This is an important first step, but you still got to go to the ABC and let them know that you got to follow their rules and go through their process. So please don't forget that step. And if you have any problems, call me, and we'll make sure we can work with you. The important thing to me when this was presented, and I know it was written and put out so we can get this moving forward, which is important, was that we do let any business that wants to be a part of it be able to participate. Because of the way the state statute is written, we can't just, because I even begged just a little, see if they let me, we can't just say all city areas in one blanket policy. We can go as broad as designating streets or blocks, but they will allow that, but we have to actually pass it every time for the areas or addresses we want. So therefore, that's why we have an ordinance tonight. But I will reiterate, any business that wants to do this, just contact us, and we are happy to do this again next week and the week after if we need to. So with that, I would like to put forward an amendment to add 3 locations that contacted me to this, and those would be the Brass Rail Tavern, the Dutch Goose, and Oscar's Bar and Grill.
Do we have a
Move.
second?
Second.
We have a second. At this point in time, this would be a vote for this, would be a vote not only for the proposed documentation that the city manager has provided for us, but also for the addition that has been provided by Councilman Duncan. Discussion on this item. Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm familiar with council's ability to convince the ABC to do things that he wishes. We have a history. But I would like to say that I'm pleased to see this moving forward. My caution is, and I'm sure that all the businesses who take advantage of this will do so, is that we make sure that we still keep adequate controls in place, and that we, when we're putting up the designated fences, gates, whatever, that they are in keeping with what we're trying to accomplish with the city and move it forward in an inviting place, and not just throwing something up temporarily so it may not look good or may not stand up to weather conditions. So that's my only ask, is that the businesses who take advantage of this, that they keep that in mind. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor. Very supportive of it.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very supportive as well, was involved with Councilman Duncan in really trying to drill this through the week. I think something particularly for the public, if they can hear this, is that they have, rather than this being treated as a regular permanent permit, this is being treated the way we deal with special permits. And the idea is to give basically temporary permission through the end of this year. The ordinance says through January 1. And what it does is to identify that we'd probably be pushing beyond where we usually do. Turns out that the ABC does not require that fixed fencing. So the idea is if somebody needs to push across a sidewalk to the other side of the sidewalk, and let the pedestrians walk through the middle, or they want to push out maybe into the first couple parking spaces in a parking lot or something like that, just so that they can get their numbers up, it's going to be allowed. That the space needs to be identifiable, but it turns out, and again, Mary Feeney worked on this, and she's here, and Spencer worked on it as well, but there's a fair amount of flexibility here on what can be done. So we really do want to encourage any restaurants, beverage establishments that are having trouble getting their volume up because of the 6-foot spacing between the tables, to get with, I believe it's development services. And it actually would be anybody, whether they are just a family-style restaurant or a coffee place or a place that serves alcohol. Anybody can come in and talk to development services about redrawing their outdoor space. The complication then, if people have alcohol, they've got to go to the ABC as well, and we had to pass this ordinance for that. But overall, the idea was to get any restaurant that saw a place where they could expand their space an opportunity to do that. And City Manager, if I can hand it across to you, the idea is that people would still have to pay the normal fees that they would pay for a permanent outdoor dining space, but that we're not going to charge fees for these temporary permits, just so everybody knows.
Right, our intent is that we would not charge these fees. Most of the reason that they're doing this is because they need to increase their revenue. So for us, this is a temporary permit and something that we can assist them with.
I just want to thank you so much. I wanted that to be clear to everybody because it's a big deal. And people should all start at development services just to see what the drawing might look like and what their options are. Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so we have a motion to adopt the the document as amended by Councilman Duncan, and we have a second. Additional discussion. Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes?
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voting yes, the motion passes. At this point in time, we move on to the non-action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is an update on the City of Topeka 2020 operating budget.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's update will be short from the standpoint of what I have to present. We do know that we did receive our sales tax revenue numbers, our sales and use tax numbers, which represent our collections for the month of March, and they were down 8.3%. We're looking at that and doing some analysis. Finance Director Jessica Lemondola will be reviewing all of our revenues and expenses and projections, and will provide a more in-depth review like we've had in the past, the full spreadsheet related to our system and where we're projecting as we go forward, based on the information we got for what we received in March for sales tax. So look forward to that on June 9th.
Questions or comments for City Manager? City Manager, I know that this is not specific budget related, but it's COVID adjustment related. I had somebody ask us if we could figuring out if it would be an impact to our budget to provide additional lane space to our families and guests that are going up and down the bridge at the Mission. Apparently there's some congestion there. I don't know if there is a technical cost or something for us to figure out a technical fix there. Just something that I want to put in your ear.
Kansas Avenue Bridge lane space,
Okay.
rescue mission traffic.
Oh. Whoa.
So just a comment to throw out there.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, Mayor, I was having trouble hearing.
If nobody else has any comments,
I'll get with her.
Okay. City Manager couldn't hear you, but he's ready to respond if you want.
oh, yes, City Manager.
Well, I think that I had trouble hearing what you were asking, and they finally got it very nicely set up. And so I think I'll need to check with you later to get the rest of what you said.
No worries.
I'll give you a call.
Any other questions for City Manager? Seeing none, at this point in time, we now proceed not into the public comment, but we move into our executive session. If the attorney could read the parameters of the session.
Announcements.
Oh, announcements. So sorry.
Okay, the June 9th prelim agenda includes a board appointment for the Human Relations Commission, board appointment for fire appeals, and the Topeka Shawnee County Public Library Board and the Civil Service Commission. Action items include a conditional use resolution for the City of Topeka Grant Jefferson Pump Station. We have a public hearing and ordinance for Aquarian Acres Subdivision Number 9 Special Assessments. And then the last item is an amendment number 1 to the joint memorandum of agreement for group health insurance. Non-action items are an update on the City of Topeka 2020 operating budget.
City Manager.
Tonight, I don't have anything additional, Mayor.
Well, tonight I'll remark a little bit about last night and what we're hearing about today. So last night we had two different tales. The first tale that we had was a young group of leaders in our community that wanted to have their voices heard. So responsibly, they worked with some other leaders in the community and worked with our police department, in which they all peacefully protested and marched towards the Evergy Plaza. And our community is filled with pride because of the advocacy that they have all expressed. I'm so proud to have been walking next to not only the chief of police, but also Councilwoman Hiller, who I think secretly was one of the people helping organize some of this. So I want to give her credit where credit and respect is due. because Councilwoman Hiller has always been an advocate for inclusion in our community and a champion. But it's wonderful to see that in a time in which it would be very easy for us to have leaders in our community. By the way, Councilwoman Nader was also there, in which it would be very easy for us as leaders in our community to stay behind and be concerned about making a statement about inequity and systems of racism that still prevail, because we just don't have conversations about the things that we should be talking about. It was wonderful to see so many of our leaders, including our chief of police. And this afternoon, I had a really good conversation with Brent Trout, and he said, you know, I was concerned. I feel like I should have been there. And I said, city manager, if you would have not felt like this was the right thing, you could have very easily called the chief and his staff from being participants in that. So I want to thank you also for your part. That brings us to the second part of the evening events, which were events that I want to make sure that I clear out, that it was not our youth in our community that organized the first event. I want to make this very clear, who went forth and then decided to cause some damage in our community. That was not the same young individuals that set up the event. And yes, there were individuals from this community who did damage into our community, and there were apparently license plates from outside of our community as well. And to anybody that wants to incite violence, I tell you that I don't recall a time in which the violence was ever started by the people protesting. If you take a look at what was happening in Selma, it was other individuals inciting the violence. And if you want to talk about the plight and the challenge of us advocating for civil liberties, we don't do it by destroying other people's property. Because what we end up doing is that we trample on the great work that other individuals are doing in order for us to have a really crucial conversation that we should have been having in our community and that has been happening in our community for several years. Several years. Our community is no stranger to talks about inclusion because we are the home of desegregation. So make no mistake, we know who we are, and we still haven't forgotten the blood that was spilled so that Kansas could be a free state. Now, have things changed? Absolutely not. There's still things that we need to work on, but we don't work on those things by looting and destroying. We work on those things by ensuring that your representation is able to speak for you, and if you don't like that, you run for office. You stand up and you speak. You change the system, but you don't destroy. So we're hearing noise about potentially tonight there being an event that again has nothing to do with the individuals that organized the event on Saturday or individuals that organized the event last night. And to all of you, I say, be cautious, not just because damaging physical property is a crime, but also because when you do so, you limit our ability to continue having meaningful conversations. And it continues bridging a divide between us. So absolutely, talk about injustice. Absolutely. Let's start having some really hard conversations. I love when Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala brings up the fact that we live in a community that she knows that it takes over $16 for us to have a living wage. When we advocate for workers, when we have really challenging conversations, those are the conversations that we must continue having. But we don't do anything with those conversations when we resort to violence. So I want to thank everybody in our community who is standing together in solidarity, who walked with your mask, who kept each other safe. Let's keep talking, Topeka. Let's not continue a tradition of hurting other people and hurting people's property, because remember, when you hurt those businesses, there's employees that depend on those businesses so that they can continue living sometimes. So, Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Tough to follow that one up, so I'm going to keep it pretty short. I know other people have things to say. First of all, I appreciate Pastor Frazier being here tonight to give the invocation. Interestingly, when I talked to him a little bit earlier, he mentioned that he'd been at the rally last night. And I thought, you know, that's kind of a positive word, rally. That was the first part of the events last night, not the second. I was proud of Topeka. I was not there, but watched it on the news. We had it on Facebook, and just seeing the plaza and the folks that were there, calm, spaced appropriately, all of those things just made me feel really good about this community. And I don't think it's going to be overshadowed by what happened afterwards. I think we know that a lot of those folks came from the outside. They appear at any opportunity to cause destruction. Topeka's not unique in that way, and we'll deal with it, and we'll look forward to more rallies that move us ahead as a society. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Appropriately so, the last several days, and particularly after last night, I've had many calls from constituents and emails and people in the community. And so I've had a lot of private conversations with individuals on my thoughts, but I haven't really put anything out there publicly. So I made a few notes because I don't want to get this one wrong, but I want to be very clear about my position for all those folks who've asked. I've spent the past week, like all of you, watching protests around the country, including what occurred here last night in Topeka. Racism, brutality, injustice remain a part of everyday life for individuals in America, and we cannot ignore it. Meanwhile, those who protect our communities honorably and heroically are too often left to answer for those who do not. I am inspired to see many Topekans speaking out to demand justice, urging peaceful protest, and working for meaningful change. I know this governing body is committed to efforts to promote inclusion and bridge divides through constructive action, candid dialogue, and support for those peacefully working towards justice and equality. You know, it doesn't matter that I grew up in a fairly diverse community right here in Topeka. It doesn't matter that my best friends growing up were African American and Asian American. It doesn't matter that I have family members who are multiracial. The fact is, I will never know what it is truly like to walk down the street or live a life as anything but a white male. My responsibility as an elected official, and as a human being, to be honest, is to listen to those of you whose experience is not meeting our expectations of the American dream and the freedoms you deserve. My responsibility is to take action and push for change that improves the lives of those whose basic rights are not honored and whose lives are threatened. My responsibility is also to ensure that the people of our city are safe and protected. Please know I am here to listen and to act on the behalf of every one of you who experience racial injustice. I will work alongside you to bring about real institutional change. I support your peaceful protests, and my door is always open. However, to those who believe the only way to get attention is through violence and destruction, please understand that does not work. It cannot be tolerated. Those actions are not a means to any productive end. When all is said and done, those horrendous acts only dishonor those who have been killed and shift the conversation away from where it needs to remain. For me, this is not the end of the conversation, but only the beginning, and I ask everyone to stay safe out there and look out for one another.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All I really have to say is you know, I think it's evidence of the way this council and our community wants to work together as we came together tonight to pass an ordinance to help assist our small business owners during this period by you know, allowing them to serve outside, and that's a good indication of what we can do together, working together to try to help each other. And then, you know, that same can be said as what happened last night. I was very impressed by the way the youth and the adults who helped them, as well as our Chief Cochran, our leadership, and law enforcement that participated in there. That's another sign of us working together, no different than what we did tonight. And my dad would always say, right's right and wrong's wrong. It doesn't matter why. And that is, that's what last night was. Right's right. And that was coming together for an injustice to speak, to share our thoughts, to see what we can do to help each other, and move that agenda forward, to try to hopefully at some point in our lifetime end in racism as we know it. And right's right and wrong's wrong. And at the law enforcement, it doesn't matter why that was wrong. And that takes away, it wasn't the same people, I understand that, but unfortunately, without that happening, we would have probably had a little bit more explanation of the positivity that happened, on the media last night than, the last portion of newscast being about what happened there. And that takes away from the hard work and the thoughtfulness of those who peacefully protested last night. And I thank them for that, and I hope as we move forward, we continue to move as we did last night, as that group of our young future leaders did, and we don't regress to the way that it ended last night. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for your comments about the rallies. Yes, I was at both the Saturday morning rally and the rally last evening. And I just have to say, what an honor and a pleasure it was. The one Saturday morning was put together by a woman who introduced herself and said, I've never done anything like this. I just felt it was important. And somehow people who knew her and people who did not know her rallied. There were people who suggested everybody should roar out in the street or should take, and the crowd itself and the leadership said, no, that's not what we want to do. And that lasted for 3 hours. Everybody who wanted to talk got to talk. So it was totally inclusive. And I would say, I've done a fair amount of crowd counting, that both Saturday morning as well as last evening, we had about 1,000 people at each of those events. We're not just talking a small group. There were a lot of people there, and it wasn't the same people either. Out of that session on Saturday, people had said more young people ought to be here, more men ought to be here, and the word went out all through social media, and it happened. Again, really proud and happy and pleased about those events and who did them and what the possibilities, what it says about this community. With that, I wanted to shout out both to the police because there was some advice to the young people before, listen, you don't have a parade permit, you need to be on the sidewalk, think about this and think about that, and the way the conversations all went, the police came in friendly force, handed out water, not only went ahead and put the black and whites out with the lights on and protected the street and said, come on, there's so many of you, it's okay, walk in the street, but also walked with them. Huge experience, a huge message that all of us, I think, will take with us forever. Also want to shout out to the Plaza folks. They weren't expecting that to happen. It's right there. They kind of got alerted and rallied around, made sure there were electrical outlets open so they could plug in the mic, welcomed everyone, and guess what? Without it being planned more than a day or so in advance, that was our inaugural event for our downtown plaza. And I feel really good about that because it's who we are. It was our young people leading it and looking toward the future. It all really worked. I do think, I agree with my colleagues and encourage everyone to read those Facebook posts, watch the news, and in particular talk with people and listen. All of us at whatever age, we've learned a lot over our lifetimes, but one of the biggest messages that people are saying is, listen to my story, ask me for my story, know me. And there's so much to learn. In particular, so I think all of us will continue to learn lessons, and I hope we soak them up and at least keep the big ones on a reminder list. Two that particularly have come out of those conversations that have stuck with me so far was a woman who spoke at the Saturday morning rally, an African-American woman, probably in her 30s or 40s, who talked about how often she was the only person of color in a room full of professional people or others. And she talked about how she knew how many people feel overwhelmed in that situation, and her advice to the crowd, and this was Saturday morning, to the 1,000 people that were there, she said, advised other persons of color, and she said, use that platform. Don't just hold up and turn the other way. Use that platform to tell your story so people know you. It was very powerful. Another thing that I've seen going around on Facebook, I think, and it has to do with white privilege. And there's a little questionnaire that I encourage everybody to look at. But one of the takeaways out of that one is that often when white privilege, when white people are challenged about white privilege, the immediate reaction is to apologize for that and to somehow make excuses and somehow say, but these are some experiences I've had, to establish some kinship. And the advice there was, you don't need to apologize for it. You were born that way. You were born into that circumstance, not necessarily because of you, and we know that. But please step forward and use that white privilege to make change, to help us make change. And I thought that was so powerful. And last, I just wanted to share that there are conversations underway for other activities that can move us forward as a community. Encourage everyone to be thinking about those things, actions they personally can take, but I'm happy to be at least a center point for ideas about how we can move this entire community forward to the kind of community that we all truly have thought we wanted to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to throw something at Hannah real quick. Hannah, your email that you sent to Chief Cochran was really, really good, and I wanted to take some off of that, but not if you intend to talk about them tonight. So can you just give me, were you going to be speaking on those issues tonight? Because if so, I'm going to move away from it, because I don't want us to double dip here.
You may proceed, Councilwoman. That is perfectly fine with me. I was going to just touch on it very briefly, but if you're already going to touch on it, you can do that, and I'll just build off of what you say.
I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. And City Manager, I did want to see if, I don't know if the chief is available, because I did want to ask some questions that we can follow up in the next meeting. I think that the protests are very good, especially if our young people are getting involved. I think that beyond the protests and the dialogue, we have to understand that our communities at this point, at this time, as it feels like the U.S. is on fire in many ways, we need to look at what is going on within our own city, within our own policies, within the Topeka Police Force, which is why I want to ask the chief some questions. And again, it's fine for follow-up later, but I want this to happen in a transparent and public way.
He is here, Councilwoman.
Okay, thank you. Chief, the information that you provided with Hannah's very pointed questions, and then I was really glad that you passed it on to all of the council people, so I thank you for that. One of the things that I was looking at was your PowerPoint presentation, and it looks like with our Topeka police officers that the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center also is involved with the Topeka Police Department in training officers here in town. Is that correct?
The academy is certified through the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center.
Okay.
And we're required to teach their curriculum that is outlined by them.
Okay. When you provided us with that PowerPoint, I was seeing, and I was a little bit disappointed. I know you don't have any control over the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. I would imagine that's a state agency. Is that correct?
Yes, it's certified through KU.
Okay, thank you. You know, during the hours of training that they provide to our police officers, they have no cultural awareness training at all listed as a standard for training. They have no hate bias training crimes hours listed as part of their standard of training. Am I looking at that correctly?
The KLET's curriculum does not, but our curriculum does. They don't teach our officers. We teach our own officers. We have our own academy. We're just certified through them, and we have to teach their required curriculum, and then we teach another, as you notice, we do twice the amount of hours that the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center does. So in our academy, there is bias-based policing, there is culture competency training, and several other classes that talk about the history of racism and law enforcement and all that. So we do teach hours, but the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center curriculum does not.
Yeah, I did see that total training hours for TPD is 912 overall hours, which, you know, that's a lot of hours. I do see on that, again, on the PowerPoint you provided, that only 4 hours of training for cultural awareness. Is that still the same, or have the hours increased for cultural awareness training?
Now, the culture competency, cultural awareness is something new that I started last year, and it's part of our academy, and that's on top and above what we teach on bias-based policing, racial profiling, and like I said, the history of racism.
Okay, and the 2 hours that are given for hate bias crimes, it says 2 hours, but that's probably increased as well?
Yeah, that's what's required by the state of Kansas as a whole. Every law enforcement officer has to have that sometime throughout the year. The state does not dictate what that training looks like, and so that's left up to individual agencies. And so we do more than 2 hours each year, but that's the minimum that the state requires.
Okay, if there is any way that I could, and the whole council, if they want, could get a report on the breakdown of hours of this 912 specific to cultural bias, race issues, crisis intervention, et cetera, because when I flip to the next side for de-escalation, which Councilwoman Nager was asking about, it appeared to me, which I wanted to clarify because I could be totally reading this wrong, is that there was 8 hours de-escalation training, but it appeared to me that that was for supervisors only. Is that correct?
Well, de-escalation training is built into every aspect of training, okay? And so when you see specific hours like that, those are specific things that we want to make sure that our supervisors or our rank and file officers or certain targeted audiences understand and all that other stuff. De-escalation training is encompassed in every aspect of what we do. And so when you say how many hours of de-escalation training do you have, well, if there's an hour training, at least 15 minutes of that hour is going to have the de-escalation built into it. And so when you ask for specific hours in de-escalation, that's a little bit difficult. But I can give you, and I encourage all of you, when we have academies come, you're more than welcome to come out and sit through every single class if you'd like to, and see what all that looks like. And so when we talk about crisis intervention, which is a 40-hour course that deals with mental health and behavioral health issues, it also has some cultural competency built into that as well, but it's all built on the aspects of de-escalating. Then that training that is used in there is paramount, and it's used in every aspect throughout what we do. Like when we go to the range, we go there for 8 hours. We don't spend 8 hours shooting our gun. We do a lot of scenario-based training, and we do a lot of de-escalation, and the hopes are is you're trained where you can get out of a situation where you don't have to use force. And then we also have what's called the Milo machine, which is they used to call it the shoot, don't shoot, but now it's decision-making, scenario-based training, where you actually have somebody that runs the scenario, and when the officers give commands in the past, it didn't interact with the officers. So if you said drop the gun, and they didn't drop the gun, then the officers had to make a decision. In this system, it allows the operator, where you say, hey, drop the gun, the operator can make the decision, in this scenario, we're going to drop the gun, and then the officer does what they need to do, or we're going to continue to have the person hold the gun. So the escalation is built into everything.
Okay, well, I understand that what you're saying is that it's a little bit different than what was stated in the PowerPoint. Like you said, it's built in to everything. I think it would still be helpful. So as we're talking about the importance of de-escalation at a national level, at a state level, and at a local level, for me, and I'm sure others, to get a better understanding of whether it be percentages or whatever, something that we can have in email form that provides its information, because we know that we're at a very hot point in our country right now, and everything that you see happen at the top ultimately trickles down to the bottom. So I think that's why it's important, and I would appreciate that. The other thing that I just want to be clear of, the Topeka Police Department does not allow chokeholds or neck holds. They are not sanctioned. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That has not been part of our practices for at least over 5 years, if not more.
Okay, that's just really wonderful to hear. I thank you for giving me the answers to that. I did want to ask the city manager a couple of questions, if I could. Thank you so much, Chief. City Manager, you and I were talking earlier today about the report that came down from the special police auditor that comes under your office. And I was looking at the two reports, which we understand had some different dates on them. Out of all the complaints and inquiries that came through on both quarters, it was determined that there was zero evidence that there was any wrongdoing by the police officer, and nothing moved forward on any of this. And I think that that's obviously a good thing to see. However, my concern is, have we ever considered a citizen review board that can work alongside Ed Collazo, who is your police auditor, to get more transparency and citizen involvement as we look at the continued, reform that we're trying to do at all levels of government, pointedly right now, police reform, which again is the issue we're looking at across the country.
A citizen review board is it's the next step, is what I would say. Right now, we feel that the independent police auditor is the position that can provide us the oversight of the police department, that provides that opportunity for citizens to be able to bring in issues that they may have forward. From my standpoint, if things were not working related to the process and the access to the independent police auditor, and the council felt that there was a need to go to that next level, then we would consider it. But right now, we're making, I think, a good step. Nobody else in the state has the independent police auditor. We have stepped up in being able to provide that as something that citizens can rely on and go to. But obviously, situations can change, and if at some point that it would change, that is the next step that you would look at.
I guess my thought on that, and thank you for the information, my thought on that is that we should be, as a council, proactive rather than reactive. I think it would be a proactive move to have a citizen panel involved. The mayor was just talking about protests where there were so many young people, and I'm sure that they were over 18 years of age, that want and are seeking to be involved in their community. We also, in our discussion, reviewed the SPCP, and I'm sorry, I forget what that acronym stands for, but it was
Police and Community Relations.
Okay, so I asked about that and possibly a partnership with Ed Collazo, who's the independent police auditor. But it was my understanding that you were saying that program, which was supposed to be of citizen volunteers, has kind of disbanded. So there is a need, I believe, for something to happen here if we want to approach what is happening in our city, not only because of what is happening nationally, but because we also know that there have been concerns in this community as well. A citizen review panel, to me, is a way to involve the community and that is not part of the local government. No matter how good intentions you may have and Mr. Collazo may have, they're still considered the system. So the importance of having peers, citizen peers involved in that, and I guess everybody can say, oh, we have to watch out for the HR component, the names, et cetera. We'll block them out and give the public a chance to be involved in what I believe would be an aspect of community policing. So that's what I wanted to say about that. So if I don't know if you and I have to have further conversation about it, but I just wanted to ask you those questions. So thank you, City Manager.
You're welcome. I want to clarify one thing. The Strengthening Community Police Partnership Group still is formed, but they're not meeting as often at this point. It's going to take a little while before we get them back together. They do have some steps still left in their process. It's not as active as it was, and so there's still some steps they have to do. So I maybe didn't characterize it correctly. It still exists, it's just not in form that it was at the very beginning when we had our initial meetings and so forth.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I'm saying too, let's utilize some of those folks that have been engaged in these protests that really want to see systemic change, want to see the real change. So thank you for that. The other thing that I just wanted to say, and please bear with me on this, I wanted to name a few names. I wanted to say names like Amadou Diallo, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Freddie Grant, Philando Castile, Botham Jean, George Floyd. So many Black men and women that have been killed by brutality that has been perceived by them and their families, their loved ones, by police. And we need to add into that equation here in Topeka, and I know it's already been said in the protests, we need to add Dominique White as a part of that equation. I talked to the White family a little bit earlier today, and I just want to say to them that I'm sorry that the urgency that we're seeing right now wasn't happening at the time when Dominique was shot in the back and killed by Topeka police officers. And I don't know how there's any way to rectify that. But I do remember in 2017 coming before the council, never, ever in my entire life believing that I would be a council person at this time. And I asked for accountability of the council. Now I'm a council person, and what I am requesting that we seriously look at as a council, understanding that we are involved so intimately in so many of these decisions that are being made, and that we have a diverse population in Topeka, is that we consider engaging in classes as we can that have to do with race relations and also have to do with hate crimes. It's the very least that we can do. It's the very least we can do for a diverse community that we serve. And I know that there's always a concern about money, but we can look for grants, we can look for the Department of Justice to get involved in this, and we can let Topeka know that we are serious about this. We have wonderful murals across this city that talk about racial justice, equity, all of this. We have wonderful displays in art museums, in galleries, et cetera. We have wonderful marches, but I beg to differ in that we have had as many really difficult conversations about the systemic issues that are creating the problems that we, like so many other cities, have across this country. So I would ask the council to please consider looking at this. I don't know how we go about doing this, but I think it's a way for the community of color and for our community as a whole to understand that we are serious about keeping our finger on the pulse of what is happening. Other than that, I just want to say also that the Station 1 continues, Engine 1 continues to be closed now for 31 days since April 6th. Engine 9 has been closed since April 6th 10 times. And what we're looking at is we're looking at issue of public safety, but also safety for our firefighters. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My heart is broken. I don't need a class to tell me about racism or injustices. I grew up in Topeka. And my heart is broken to see what happened yesterday. When the young people called me and came together to protest, they wanted to protest, they told me because their voices, they felt like they didn't get a chance to speak at the first rally. They felt like it was for the older generation. I thank them for the protest, the peaceful protest. Topeka, we are better than this. The people that are out there that have come forward to tear up our city, the city that I was born and raised. I wasn't born on no farm. I grew up in Highcrest. I grew up in East Topeka. I still live in East Topeka. I will continue to live in East Topeka. These are the people whose kids that I know. It's hard to hear them say that their voices are not heard. I've encouraged them. I will continue to encourage them to go to the polls. That's what we need to do. We need to continue to go to the polls. We need to tell people when they're tearing up our town to stop, to stop. We can go through all the training that we want to, but if we are not going to do the right thing, and I thank Chief Cochran because he has continued to hold his men accountable. I've talked to the officers that have been threatened, their wives have been threatened, their children have been threatened, their families have been threatened, and I've talked to them. We live in a society where our young people are just angry. And we've got to break that cycle. It's deeper than racial profiling. It's deeper than that. And old wounds do come up. I understand that. Because when the Lamas brothers, who are just like my family, who grew up on 200 Hancock, were shot for being at home, for having a family gathering, that hurt, that deeply hurt. It continues to hurt. But I have made it a point to continue to talk to people, to get on these boards, to go out and change the polls from the top to the bottom. It's very heartful. And I just want to say I have a heavy heart right now. I really do. I will continue as a council rep to hold our police department accountable. And there's some officers on there that I know that grew up with my daughter, that they're her age. And they're good and bad, and just like in anything else. But Topeka, we are better than that. We are better than that. And to our young people, I say, don't give up. Continue to do the peaceful protest. Continue to do that. Continue to talk to our neighbors. Continue to talk. And then let's just not talk, but let's walk to the polls and let's vote. And we got to continue to talk to the families, continue to talk to them. And as a council rep, I will continue to see that people are held accountable. Again, I heard of something that's going on tonight. It bothers me because, let's just not take the focus off the real issue, what the real issue is. And that's what we do when we tear up our cities and we riot. We take it to a different level. Let's just not do that. Let's continue to talk, and then let's continue to go to the polls and do something about it. Mayor, I thank you and for your leadership. I thank all those that were there at the rally, and I thank all of those that were peaceful. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. As Mr. Duncan said, it's hard to know as a white guy, frankly, what it's like to be an African American or anybody of color in America. But I can tell you, as a human being, I was sickened by what I saw up in Minneapolis. That said, I was so proud of how our citizens handled themselves at the thing this weekend, as well as last night, our young people doing this up to the point where outsiders came in and destroyed our city. But let me say, I really appreciate everything that the Chief Cochran has done, the way he's reached out. It's easy sometimes, we see something happens in another city, and we kind of project that on our own police, and our police are not the Minneapolis police. I should say, most of the Minneapolis police aren't that criminal who killed Mr. Floyd. And I don't want to get in an argument, but I do disagree with one of my colleagues that there's a situation with another gentleman here in Topeka, and if you're in a park and you're shooting a gun, I hope the police go out and confront you. So all that said, I so appreciate everyone who came out and peacefully protested, and I sure hope there's not anything that happens tonight, but our prayers are with our police and with our peaceful protesters. We're in this with you guys. We are equally disgusted by what happened up in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. I really don't know where to start. My colleagues have all been very eloquent in expressing their thoughts about the events that have affected our nation. Can you hear me? Okay. And everybody has their perspective, but let me give you mine. I can remember being stopped by the police in Topeka and being told I was in the wrong side of town, that I didn't belong on this side of town. And that happened more than once, because for some police officers, they believed that Mexican Americans could only be in one side of the part of this town. But I determined myself way back then that to change that, I had to be someone within the group to start to show an example how we were not relegated to one part of this community. And so from the very first, in the start of my career in law enforcement, I have reached out to every segment of this community to let them know that I appreciate every aspect of their lives. I know where they come from. I've experienced that same kind of discrimination. Whenever I approach somebody, I give them the benefit of the doubt that they have gone through something to get them into contact with me as a law enforcement officer. And that something can be very devastating, and it can be something that controls their actions toward me. But it was my responsibility to remain a professional and do my job without discrimination. And I have to be honest that I have seen changes within our police department. I can remember taking a complaint to my chief of police about things that were going on in the police department, and it was disregarded. That chief would probably dispute that, but there's a matter of record. it laid on his desk until I moved it forward with the city and brought it to the attention where discipline was brought against officers for actions that were unbecoming law enforcement and had no place in our Topeka Police Department. So I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that rather than just asking questions about what can we do, how do we solve this problem, what's going on, I've done something about it. And that's what we need to do. Put actions to our words. Be cognizant that everything we say and do is looked at with a very, very big magnifying glass because we are in the public eye. But be honest about it. Don't say it because it's the right thing to say at the right time. Say it because it's truthful. And having said what I did about the police department, I can tell you, because I have experienced the racial profiling training, the bias-based training, I have involved myself at the state level and at the city level to get to not just training, because that's just a number of hours. The difference that it makes is leadership. And leadership has made all the difference with the Topeka Police Department under Chief Cochran. Now, you can give all the training in the world, but if that officer, man or woman, shows up wearing that badge and doesn't have the character and integrity within them already, the training hours aren't going to make it happen. So it's important for us to recognize that it's a human quality. It's not a learned or trained quality. It's something that we have to know about ourselves. It's something that our leadership within law enforcement has to recognize and speak to it and take action on it. When bad behavior happens, it can't be tolerated. The message has to be sent that you are no longer needed with the Topeka Police Department. And I am proud to say that I was an officer for 34 years. And that this agency, regardless of how closely you want to look at it, is better than many agencies, not just within this state, but in the country, because of the innovative things they have done on their own before being asked to do it, that have helped set the stage for us to be able to speak with our citizens in a one-on-one way. So don't get caught up in the training hours. It's not what counts the most. You can sit me in a cab of a over-the-road truck for hours and hours and hours. If I get out there and can't do the job and run into something in the first 10 miles, then those training hours didn't mean anything. I either am able to do it, am capable of doing it, and have the highest expectations of how I should do my job. And I want to speak to the citizens of Topeka, because I heard reports that last night when there was some of that vandalism that was going on, there were citizens that stepped forward to try to stop that vandalism. That speaks so well of our community, that they were able to intervene, at least safely, to make sure that their city doesn't get torn up by people who have lost the sight of what we're trying to accomplish. I encourage everyone, like Councilwoman Ortiz suggests, if you have thoughts and ideas, suggestions, and want to make a difference, get involved. Don't sit on your chair, point the finger, and pick apart everything you see. Get involved and work with people who are already doing the job. My compliments to the city, my compliments to the police officers. I have worn that riot mask and carried that baton and stood in a line like they did last night. And I know it takes every bit of restraint to keep your stuff in check, especially when oftentimes you might want to be on the other side of that line, but your job is to protect this city. So I compliment them for their professionalism. I compliment the city's citizens for the way they conducted themselves. And I don't jump too critically on those who are disruptive. They know what they are. There's no reason for me to have to tell them. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start out by just simply stating that Black Lives Matter. Saying this does not devalue any other life. It just simply states that our Black brothers and sisters experience life in a way that no one else does, especially here in America. This is important to understand that we don't all have the same experience. And it is important to listen to those who do not have the same experience as you. I know every day of my life, I benefit from the white privilege that allows me to move through the world in almost Disney princess-like manner. I have pleasant interactions with people. People trust me implicitly. I am able to run for office, have a professional dental practice. I am so blessed, but I experience so much privilege because of the way I look. And that is not just, and that is not fair. So we need to acknowledge this truth. We need to know that we need to stand up for this truth. And although that is a very, very simple, very, very simple mission in words, it's very hard to live out. And speaking with some of my friends who are people of color and listening to their stories, they often say they are exhausted because it's not just George Floyd. It's not just the members of society who were listed by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala earlier. It is a history that is intrinsic to the United States. And we need to rectify this. We need to make this just. And if they're exhausted, I plan on being exhausted too. If you are a white person, make sure you are listening. Make sure you are supporting your Black brothers and sisters, the other brothers and sisters of color in your life. Make sure you're reaching out to those communities and supporting them. Make sure you are registering to vote and voting. Make sure you run. Make sure you demand that the people who are running for office are seeking justice. Ask questions and make sure that they are answered. I'm very, very proud of the transparency displayed by the Topeka Police Department, by Chief Bill Cochran, and by the independent police auditor, Ed Collazo, and our city manager, Brent Trout. If you have questions, please ask them. They will give you the information you need. I've already gotten plenty of information on our city's departments. Sorry, I'm kind of shaking. On our department's protocol on wearing body cams, on making sure that we are involving the community, on community policing and more. It's all there, and it's all there for you to find out about. If you have any other questions, concerns, make sure you're asking your representatives at every level of government, and know that it's very clear that we are ready to put action to our words here on the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you all for those heartfelt statements. Thank you all for sharing your heart and being vulnerable. At this point in time, we do have to adjourn to an executive session. If the attorney could please read the parameters for that session.
Yes, governing body. The motion would be to recess into executive session for a period of 20 minutes to discuss the acquisition of real property as justified by KSA 75-4319B6. In order to aid the discussion, the request would be that the following persons would be present. In addition to legal counsel, City Manager Brent Trout, Public Works Director Jason Peak, Topeka Police Chief Bill Cochran, and Planning Director Bill Fyander. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the council chambers.
We have heard the parameters. Do we have a motion to recess into executive session?
So moved.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Hiller, seconded by Councilman Padilla.
At this point in time, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, Ms. Ortiz voting no.
9 having voting yes, we have overruled Councilwoman Ortiz, and we will recess into executive not to exceed 20 minutes. Let us know when we're ready, Taylor.
Team.